Why did my sister arrive at Christmas dinner by taxi when her husband had just gifted her a $150,000 SUV? How did one smirk from my nephew expose who really owned everything in that house? I stayed calm and did exactly what made my sister smile for the first time that night. I arrived at Gareth and Rosa's place 40 minutes early. That wasn't unusual. I'd learned over the years that showing up before the crowd gave me time to observe without distraction. The house sat in one of those suburban developments where every lawn looked professionally maintained and every driveway could fit 3 vehicles comfortably. Gareth's Mercedes occupied the left side, the right side stood empty. I parked on the street and walked up the stone pathway. Wreaths hung on the door, white lights traced the roofline. Everything looked like a catalog page. I rang the bell and waited. Gareth opened the door wearing a cashmere sweater and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Silas, early as always." "Traffic was light," I said. He stepped aside and I walked into the hallway. The house smelled like cinnamon and roasted meat. Somewhere deeper inside, I could hear Rosa moving around the kitchen. Gareth closed the door and gestured toward the living room. "Make yourself comfortable. Rosa's finishing up. The others should be here soon." I nodded and moved toward the couch, but I didn't sit. Instead, I stood near the window that overlooked the driveway. Gareth disappeared toward the kitchen. I heard low voices, his and Rosa's, but couldn't make out words. 20 minutes passed. I checked my phone twice. Then I heard the sound of tires on pavement. A yellow taxi pulled into the driveway. I watched as the rear door opened and Rosa stepped out. She wore a dark green dress and heels that didn't look comfortable. She leaned back into the cab to retrieve a casserole dish covered in foil, then straightened and closed the door with her hip. The taxi reversed and drove away. I stood there for a moment, processing what I'd just seen. Rosa walked toward the front door, her movements quick and efficient. She didn't look up at the window. She didn't pause. She moved like someone who wanted to get inside before anyone noticed. I turned away from the window and moved back toward the center of the living room. A few seconds later, I heard the door open. Rosa's voice drifted in from the hallway. "I'm back. Just need to get this in the oven." Gareth's voice responded, closer now. "You took a cab?" The SUV was making a noise. Didn't want to risk it. Her tone was light, casual, practiced. I stayed where I was. Gareth appeared in the doorway a moment later, glancing at me before heading back toward the kitchen. I heard cabinet doors opening and closing, the oven door creaked, then footsteps approached and Rosa appeared. She smiled when she saw me, but the smile flickered at the edges. "Silas, I didn't realize you were already here." "Got here a bit ago," I said. "How are you?" "Good, busy, you know how it is." She moved past me toward the dining room, adjusting a centerpiece that didn't need adjusting. I watched her hands. They trembled slightly. "The SUV Gareth got you," I said. "Is it giving you trouble already?" She froze for half a second, then resumed fussing with the centerpiece. "Just a rattling sound. Probably nothing. I'll take it in next week." "That's frustrating. Brand new vehicle." "These things happen." She turned and walked back toward the kitchen before I could say anything else. I stood there, thinking about the way she'd answered, the way she'd moved, the way she hadn't met my eyes. 10 minutes later, the doorbell rang again. This time it was Elaine, Gareth's cousin, carrying a bottle of wine and wearing too much perfume. She hugged Rosa, complimented the decorations, and settled into the living room with a glass of white wine that Gareth poured for her. Then Marion arrived. Gareth's mother moved through the house like she owned it. Technically, she might. I'd never seen paperwork, but I'd noticed over the years how decisions always seemed to root through her. She wore a navy suit and pearls. Her hair was silver and perfect. She nodded at me once, then took a seat in the armchair nearest the fireplace. "Where's the boy?" she asked. "He'll be down in a minute," Gareth said. As if on cue, Noah appeared at the top of the stairs. 21 years old, dressed in a button-down shirt and jeans that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. He descended slowly, phone in hand, thumbs moving across the screen. "Evening, everyone," he said without looking up. Rosa appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. "Dinner's almost ready, just a few more minutes." "No rush," Marion said, but her tone suggested otherwise. We moved toward the dining room. The table had been set with care. China plates, crystal glasses, cloth napkins folded into triangles. Gareth took the head of the table. Marion sat to his right. Rosa sat to his left. Noah claimed the seat next to his grandmother. Elaine and I filled in the remaining spots. I watched as Gareth poured wine. He filled Marion's glass first, then his own, then moved around the table. When he reached Rosa, he poured half as much as he'd given everyone else. "You're driving tonight, right?" he said. Rosa blinked. "I took a cab here." "Right. The noise. He topped off her glass. We'll get that looked at. It's fine, Rosa said. I'll handle it. No, I'll call the dealership tomorrow. They'll send someone. Noah snorted. Not quite a laugh, but close. I glanced at him. He was looking at his phone again, but the corner of his mouth twitched upward. Something funny? I asked. He looked up, met my eyes, shrugged. Just a text. Must be hilarious. It's fine, Silas, Rosa said quickly. Too quickly. Gareth cleared his throat. Let's eat. Rosa disappeared into the kitchen and returned with the first dish. Roasted chicken, glazed carrots, mashed potatoes. Everything looked perfect. She set the platters down and took her seat. We passed food around the table. Forks clinked against china. Small talk filled the spaces. Elaine asked about work. I gave a short answer. Marian asked about the weather forecast. Gareth made a joke about holiday traffic. Noah stayed quiet, occasionally glancing at his phone under the table. So, Rosa, Elaine said, I saw photos of the SUV Gareth got you. It's gorgeous. Rosa's fork paused halfway to her mouth. She set it down carefully. It's very nice. I bet you're loving it. I haven't driven it much yet. Well, when you do, you'll have to take me for a ride. Of course. Noah's smirk widened. He didn't look up from his plate, but I saw it. That small, satisfied curve of his lips. Like he knew something the rest of us didn't, or like he knew something we all did, and he was the only one willing to find it amusing. I leaned back in my chair and took a sip of wine. The pieces were starting to fit together. The taxi, the half-filled glass. The way Rosa deferred to Gareth on every small decision, the way Noah mirrored his father's casual dominance, and the way Marian sat at the table, saying almost nothing, but somehow commanding the entire room. Gareth, I said, what dealership did you go through for the SUV? He looked up. Sterling Motors. Why? Just curious. I've been thinking about upgrading. They're excellent. Ask for Davidson. He'll take care of you. I'll do that. I filed the name away. Sterling Motors. Davidson. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Rosa excused herself to get dessert. I watched her go. When she returned, she was carrying a pie that looked homemade. Apple, from the smell of it. She set it in the center of the table and began cutting slices. This looks wonderful, Marian said. Thank you, Rosa replied. Did you make it yourself? I did. Good. Store-bought never tastes the same. It wasn't quite a compliment, more like an inspection passed. Rosa handed out plates, and we ate in relative silence. The pie was good, better than good. Rosa had always been skilled in the kitchen, even when we were kids. She'd learned from our mother, who'd learned from hers. It was one of the few things she'd carried forward from our childhood that felt entirely hers. After dessert, we moved to the living room. Gareth poured coffee. Elaine asked about holiday plans. Marian mentioned a charity luncheon. Noah excused himself and went upstairs. Rosa sat on the far end of the couch, hands folded in her lap, smiling when appropriate, but saying little. I stayed for another hour, then made my excuses. Early meeting tomorrow, long drive. Rosa walked me to the door. Thanks for coming, she said. Of course. She glanced back toward the living room, then stepped closer. Her voice dropped. It was nice to see you. You too. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something else, then closed it again. I waited, but she just smiled and opened the door. I walked to my car, got in, and sat there for a moment before starting the engine. Through the window, I could see the lit interior of the house. Gareth stood near the fireplace, gesturing while he spoke. Marian sat in her chair, listening. Rosa was nowhere visible. I started the car and drove home. The smirk on Noah's face stayed with me the entire drive. The apartment was dark when I got back. I flipped on the kitchen light and set my keys on the counter. The place was small. One bedroom, a galley kitchen, a living room barely big enough for a couch, and a bookshelf. I'd lived here for 6 years. It suited me. I poured myself a glass of water and sat at the kitchen table. My laptop sat where I'd left it that morning, closed but ready. I opened it and pulled up a blank document. Then I sat there, staring at the screen, thinking about the evening. The taxi, the smirk, the way Rosa had deflected every question about the SUV. I closed the laptop and went to bed. The next morning, I woke early and went for a run. The streets were quiet, the air cold enough to see my breath. I ran my usual route, 3 miles through the neighborhood, past the park, back toward home. By the time I got back, the sun was starting to rise. I showered, dressed, made coffee. Then I sat down at the kitchen table again and opened my laptop. My job as an anti-crisis manager meant I spent a lot of time looking at patterns. Financial patterns, behavioral patterns, communication patterns. Most people thought crisis management was about responding to disasters after they happened. Sometimes that was true. But the better part of the job was spotting problems before they became disasters. I started making notes. Not about work, about Rosa. The SUV wasn't the first gift Gareth had given her. There'd been others over the years. A bracelet for their 10th anniversary, a trip to Europe for her 40th birthday, the renovation of the kitchen 3 years ago. Every time he'd presented it publicly. Every time Rosa had smiled and thanked him. And every time I'd noticed something off. The bracelet had been beautiful, but Rosa rarely wore it. The Europe trip had been planned entirely by Gareth. The cities, the hotels, the itinerary. Rosa had come back exhausted, not refreshed. The kitchen renovation had taken 8 months and left Rosa without a functional cooking space for most of it. She'd ended up eating takeout in her own home while workers tore apart the room she'd used every day. Generosity, Gareth called it. Investment, he'd told me once. I invest in my family. But investment implied ownership, and ownership implied control. I picked up my phone and scrolled back through old messages. Found one from Rosa, sent about 6 months ago. She'd asked if I knew anything about estate planning. I'd sent her a link to a law firm and asked if everything was okay. She'd replied that it was fine, just thinking ahead. I hadn't pushed. I should have. I pulled up a search engine and typed Sterling Motors Davidson. A dealership website appeared. Luxury vehicles, high-end service. I clicked through to the staff page and found a photo of Davidson, mid-50s, graying hair, expensive suit. The kind of salesman who worked on commission and knew how to read a room. I closed the tab and opened my email. Scrolled through until I found a message from a colleague named Rita. She worked in legal compliance and owed me a favor from a project we'd handled together 2 years ago. I drafted a message asking if she knew anyone who specialized in vehicle registration and asset transfers. Kept it vague, sent it. Then I got ready for work. The office was downtown, 30-minute drive in light traffic. I worked for a mid-sized firm that handled reputation management and financial restructuring for clients who'd made bad decisions and needed someone to clean up the aftermath. My role was simple. Assess the damage, identify the weak points, and build a plan to minimize exposure. I was good at it. I spent the morning on a conference call with a client who'd invested in a startup that turned out to be running a sophisticated fraud scheme. He wanted to know how to distance himself without looking complicit. I walked him through the steps. Document everything. Cooperate fully. Stay quiet publicly. Let the investigators do their job. By the end of the call, he sounded calmer. At lunch, I checked my email. Rita had replied. She'd given me the name of someone who worked in municipal records, a guy named Paul who apparently knew every loophole in the vehicle registration system. She'd included his number. I called him that afternoon. Paul answered on the third ring. His voice was nasal and bored. Yeah? This is Silas Oren. Rita gave me your number. Rita, right. What do you need? Information on a vehicle registration. I need to know who's listed as the legal owner. What kind of vehicle? SUV, luxury model. Purchased within the last 2 months. You got a VIN? Not yet. Then I can't help you. I can get it. Then call me back when you do. He hung up. I sat at my desk, staring at the phone. Getting the VIN meant getting close to the vehicle itself, which meant going back to Rosa's house, which meant explaining why I needed it, or finding another way. I pulled up the Sterling Motors website again, found their service department page, a form for scheduling appointments. I filled it out using a fake name and a burner email I kept for situations like this. Selected the option for a new vehicle inspection. In the notes section, I wrote, Recent purchase. Want to confirm registration details match purchase agreement. I submitted the form and waited. 3 hours later, I got a reply. They could fit me in next week. I replied saying I'd prefer something sooner. I was leaving town and wanted to handle it before I left. They offered me a slot in 2 days. I took it. That evening, I drove back toward Rosa's neighborhood. Not to her house. I stayed a few blocks away, parked near a coffee shop, and waited. Around 6:30, Gareth's Mercedes drove past, heading toward the main road. Alone. I waited another 20 minutes, then drove to the house. Rosa answered the door. She looked surprised to see me. Silas, is everything okay? Everything's fine. I was in the area and thought I'd stop by. She hesitated, then stepped aside. Come in. The house was quieter than it had been the night before. No music, no television, no voices, just the hum of the heating system. Is Gareth here? I asked. He had a dinner meeting. Won't be back until late. Noah? Upstairs, I think. We moved into the kitchen. Rosa filled a kettle and set it on the stove. Tea? Sure. She pulled 2 mugs from a cabinet and set them on the counter. We stood there in silence while the water heated. When the kettle whistled, she poured the water and handed me a mug. Earl Grey. I took a sip and waited. You drove here, she said finally. I did. Not worried about the rattling noise? I smiled slightly. My car's old. It rattles all the time. She didn't smile back. She stared into her mug, both hands wrapped around it like she needed the warmth. Rosa, I said, where's the SUV? She didn't answer. Is it in the garage? No. Then where? Gareth took it this morning. Said he wanted to have it serviced. On a weekday? He wanted to make sure it was ready for me. Ready for you. Yes. I set my mug down on the counter. When's the last time you actually drove it? She looked up. Her eyes were tired. Silas, please. When? I haven't. Not once? No. Why not? She turned away, facing the window that overlooked the backyard. The lights were off out there, just darkness beyond the glass. Because it's not mine, she said quietly. There it was, the thing I'd suspected since the moment I saw her step out of that taxi. The thing Noah's smirk had confirmed. Whose name is it in? I asked. She didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was barely above a whisper. Marion's. I let that sit for a moment. Marion, Gareth's mother, the woman who sat at the head of every family gathering without ever holding an official title. Why? I asked. Gareth said it was for tax purposes. Something about the way the trust is structured. He said it didn't matter whose name was on the paperwork, that it was still mine. But you can't drive it. I can. I just... She trailed off. You just what? I just need to ask first. The words hung there. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger, not yet, just clarity. How long has this been going on? I asked. What do you mean? The gifts, the things he gives you. How many of them are actually yours? She turned back toward me. Her expression was guarded now, defensive. You don't understand. Then explain it to me. It's complicated. I've got time. She shook her head. Silas, I appreciate you caring. I do, but this is between me and Gareth. Is it? Yes. What about the house? She blinked. What about it? Whose name is it in? Gareth's. Just Gareth's? She hesitated. And Marion's. Not yours. It's fine. Is it? Silas, stop. But I couldn't, because now that the pattern was visible, I couldn't unsee it. What about your bank accounts? I asked. We have a joint account. And your own? Silence. Rosa. I have access to what I need. That's not what I asked. She picked up her mug and carried it to the sink, poured the tea out without drinking it. When she turned back, her face was composed again. The mask was back in place. I think you should go, she said. Rosa, please. I looked at her for a long moment, saw the way she held herself, the way her shoulders were drawn up, tense, the way her hands gripped the edge of the counter. I picked up my mug and walked it to the sink, set it down gently. If you need anything, I said, call me. I'm fine. I mean it. She nodded but didn't meet my eyes. I left through the front door and walked to my car. As I pulled away, I glanced back at the house. Rosa was standing in the window, watching me leave. I didn't hear from Rosa for 3 days. I thought about calling, but decided against it. Pushing now would only make her retreat further. Instead, I focused on the appointment I'd scheduled at Sterling Motors. The dealership was located on the east side of town, tucked between a high-end furniture store and a private golf club. The building was all glass and chrome, designed to look expensive. I parked in the visitor lot and walked inside. The showroom smelled like leather and air freshener. A blonde woman in a fitted suit greeted me from behind a curved reception desk. Good afternoon. How can I help you? I have an appointment. Service department. Name? I gave her the fake name I'd used on the form. She typed something into her computer, then nodded. Right this way. She led me through a side door into a hallway that opened into a large garage bay. 3 vehicles were up on lifts, mechanics working beneath them. She pointed toward an office in the corner. Wait in there. Someone will be with you shortly. I thanked her and crossed the bay. The office was small. A desk, 2 chairs, a filing cabinet. I sat down and waited. 5 minutes later, a man in a Sterling Motors polo shirt appeared. Mid-40s, receding hairline, clipboard in hand. Mr. Turner? The fake name? I nodded. I'm Jeff. I understand you wanted to discuss registration details on a recent purchase. That's right. Do you have the vehicle with you? Not today. I wanted to confirm some information first. He frowned slightly. I'm not sure I follow. A family member purchased a vehicle here recently. I'm helping them sort through some paperwork. There's a question about whether the registration matches the purchase agreement. Who's the family member? Rosa Hale. He glanced at his clipboard, then back at me. Are you authorized to discuss her account? I'm her brother. I'll need to verify that before I can release any information. Of course, I can provide identification. He hesitated, then gestured toward the desk. Let me pull up her file. He sat down and typed something into the computer. Waited. Frowned. Hale, you said? Rosa Hale. More typing. Then he shook his head. I don't see a purchase under that name. Try Gareth Hale. He typed again. This time, something appeared on the screen. He leaned closer, reading. Okay, I've got a record here. Luxury SUV. Purchased 8 weeks ago. But the registration isn't under Gareth Hale either. Who's it under? Marion Hale. There it was. Confirmation. Can you tell me why? I asked. He scrolled through the file. Looks like it was a trust purchase. The vehicle was bought through a family trust with Marion Hale listed as the primary beneficiary. That's not uncommon for high net worth families. Tax advantages, estate planning, that sort of thing. So Rosa has no legal claim to the vehicle. Not according to the registration, no. I leaned back in the chair, processing. What if she wanted to drive it? She'd need permission from the registered owner. Even if it was a gift? Gifts are tricky. Legally, whoever's name is on the title is the owner. Doesn't matter what promises were made. I thanked him and stood. He looked confused. That's it? You don't need anything else? That's all I needed. I walked out of the office, back through the garage bay, through the showroom. The blonde receptionist called out something as I passed, but I didn't stop. I got in my car and sat there for a moment, hands on the steering wheel. Marion Hale owned the SUV, which meant Gareth had gifted Rosa something he didn't own, something he'd presented as hers but kept firmly under his mother's control. And Rosa had accepted it because what choice did she have? Refusing would have meant confrontation. Questioning would have meant admitting she saw the game being played. So she'd smiled and thanked him and taken a taxi on Christmas. I pulled out my phone and opened my calendar. Scrolled forward a few weeks. There, January 15th, a family brunch Gareth had mentioned during dinner. Annual thing, he'd said. Marion insists. I created a reminder and labeled it positioning. Then I started the car and drove to my office. The rest of the week passed quietly. I worked my regular cases, took calls, attended meetings. On Thursday, I had lunch with Rita. She asked if Paul had been helpful. I told her he'd pointed me in the right direction. She didn't press for details. Friday evening, Rosa called. Silas? Her voice was shaky. I sat up straighter. What's wrong? Nothing. I wanted to apologize for the other night. I shouldn't have asked you to leave like that. You don't need to apologize. I do. You were just trying to help. Are you okay? A pause. Then, can we talk? In person? When? Tomorrow? Maybe we could meet somewhere for coffee? I'll come to you. No, not here. Somewhere else. Where? She named a cafe downtown, neutral ground. I told her I'd be there at 10. She thanked me and hung up. I spent Saturday morning preparing. Not sure what for, exactly, but preparation had always been my default mode. I reviewed the notes I'd made earlier in the week, the dealership visit, the conversation with Paul, the pattern of control I'd mapped out. When I arrived at the cafe, Rosa was already there. She sat at a corner table, hands wrapped around a paper cup. She looked smaller than I remembered. Tired. I ordered coffee and joined her. Thanks for meeting me, she said. Of course. She stared into her cup. I've been thinking about what you said, about the gifts. And? You're right. None of it's mine. The SUV, the house, even the furniture. It's all in Gareth's name, or Marion's, or the trust's, but never mine. How long have you known? Years. But I kept telling myself it didn't matter, that we were married, so what was his was mine, that he was just being practical. But it does matter. Yes. She looked up. Her eyes were red-rimmed. I wanted to leave once, about 5 years ago. I'd packed a bag and everything. But then I realized I had nowhere to go, no money of my own, no credit cards in my name. I'd been a stay-at-home mother for so long, I didn't even have recent work experience. What about Noah? He was 16. He would have stayed with Gareth. Would have. Would. He made that clear. I took a sip of coffee. Why are you telling me this now? Because I'm tired, and because you're the only person who's ever asked. We sat in silence for a moment. The cafe hummed with weekend activity, people ordering, conversations overlapping, espresso machines hissing. What do you want? I asked finally. I don't know. Yes, you do. She looked at me, really looked at me. I want to feel like something is mine, even if it's small, even if it's just, I don't know. A car I can drive without asking, a bank account with my name on it. That's not unreasonable. Gareth would say I'm being ungrateful. Gareth's wrong. She smiled faintly. You never liked him. I never trusted him. Why not? Because people who need to control everything are usually hiding something. She laughed. It was a bitter sound. What could he possibly be hiding? He's successful, respected, wealthy. What more does he need? Maybe that's exactly what he's hiding, that none of it's as secure as he pretends. She frowned. What do you mean? I mean, people who build their identity on appearances are usually standing on shaky ground. They can't afford to let anyone look too closely. You think he's in trouble? I think he's invested a lot in making sure everyone sees him a certain way, and that kind of investment requires constant maintenance. She processed that, then shook her head. Even if that's true, it doesn't change anything. I'm still stuck. Are you? Silas, I have no income, no assets, no leverage. What am I supposed to do? File for separation and hope I get a decent settlement? Gareth has lawyers on retainer. I'd be destroyed. Not if you plan it right? She stared at me. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm good at what I do, and what I do is solve problems that seem unsolvable. This isn't a corporate crisis, isn't it? Someone has something they shouldn't. Someone else wants it back. There are rules, laws, structures. All of it can be navigated if you know where to look. Silas, I'm not saying I have a plan right now, but if you want one, I can build it. She looked down at her coffee. I don't want to cause trouble. Rosa, there's already trouble. You're just living inside it. She didn't respond. I waited. Let her think. Let her decide. Finally, she looked up. If I said yes, what would you need from me? Information. Everything you can remember about the paperwork you've signed. Bank statements, trust documents, anything that shows who owns what. I don't have access to most of that. Then we get access. How? Carefully. She studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Okay. Okay? Yes. Do it. I felt something shift. Not excitement, not satisfaction. Just clarity. One more thing, I said. The family brunch next month. Gareth mentioned it at Christmas. What about it? I need you to make sure I'm invited. The next 2 weeks were a lesson in patience. I couldn't rush this. Couldn't make Gareth suspicious. Couldn't do anything that might alert him or Marion or anyone else that something was shifting beneath the surface. So I worked quietly. I started with the trust. Rosa managed to get me a copy of the original document. She'd found it in a filing cabinet in Gareth's office while he was out one evening. She photographed every page with her phone and sent them to me in a compressed file. The trust was exactly what I expected. A family trust established 17 years ago, right after Noah was born. Gareth and Marion were co-trustees. Rosa wasn't listed anywhere. The assets included the house, 2 investment accounts, and a portfolio of vehicles. Everything cycled through the trust, which meant everything bypassed Rosa entirely. I made notes, circled key clauses, looked for weak points. There was one, a provision buried on page 11 that stated any trustee could be removed with a 2/3 vote of the beneficiaries. The beneficiaries were listed as Gareth, Marion, and Noah. Noah, 21 years old, legally an adult, and, according to the document, entitled to a vote. I filed that away. Next, I pulled up Marion's background, property records, business filings, anything public I could access. She'd been married once, Gareth's father, who'd passed away 12 years ago. Since then, she'd lived modestly but comfortably. No flashy purchases, no high-profile investments, just steady, quiet control. She was smart. Smarter than Gareth, probably, which made her dangerous. I thought about Noah's smirk again, the way he'd laughed at his mother arriving by taxi. He'd learned that from somewhere, and I had a feeling it wasn't from Gareth. On Wednesday, I had another meeting with Paul. This time, I had the VIN. He ran it through his system and confirmed what I already knew. The SUV was registered to Marion, purchased through the trust, and Rosa had no legal access. What about insurance? I asked. Let me check. He typed something, waited. Listed driver is Gareth Hale, secondary is Marion Hale, no one else. So if Rosa drove it and got into an accident, she wouldn't be covered. Perfect. Another piece. I paid Paul for his time and left. That evening, I drafted an email to a colleague who specialized in trust law, kept it hypothetical. Client in a situation where assets are held in a family trust, but one family member is effectively excluded. What are the options? She replied the next day with a list of potential strategies. Most of them required litigation, expensive, time-consuming litigation. I wasn't interested in litigation. On Friday, I went for a drink with a guy I'd worked with years ago. He'd moved into private investigation, corporate espionage mostly, but he knew how to dig up information when it mattered. I bought him a beer and asked what he knew about high-net-worth estate planning. Trusts? Yeah. Pain in the neck, designed to protect wealth, which means they're designed to be airtight. Why? Just curious. He didn't believe me, but he didn't push. If you're trying to break one, you'd need leverage, something the trustees don't want public. Like what? Depends. Financial irregularities, conflicts of interest, anything that could call their judgment into question. How would you find that? He shrugged. Bank records, business filings. Sometimes it's as simple as talking to the right people. Who are the right people? Accountants, lawyers, anyone who touches the money. I filed that away too. Over the next week, I kept my distance from Rosa. We communicated through encrypted messages, short, practical updates. She'd found another document, this one related to the renovation Gareth had done on the house. The contractor had invoiced the trust directly. I saved the file. She also sent me a list of Gareth's business contacts, names, numbers, email addresses. I didn't ask how she'd gotten it. I just thanked her and started making calls. Most of them led nowhere, polite conversations that yielded nothing useful. But one name stood out, Bernard Chen, an accountant who'd worked with Gareth for 15 years. I called him on a Tuesday afternoon, introduced myself as a colleague looking for a referral. Gareth speaks highly of you, I said. That's kind of him. Bernard's voice was cautious. I'm working with a client who has a similar setup. Family trust, multiple assets. Wondering if you might have time to consult? I'd have to check my schedule. What's the client's name? I'd prefer to discuss details in person. Are you free this week? He hesitated. Friday afternoon. I'll take it. We agreed on a time and location. When Friday came, I drove to his office, a small suite in a professional building near the courthouse. Bernard was exactly what I expected. Late 50s, wire-rimmed glasses, meticulous handwriting. We shook hands and sat down. So, he said, tell me about your client. I gave him a story, vague enough to seem plausible, specific enough to sound legitimate. A family trust with 3 beneficiaries. One trustee who controlled all the decisions. Another family member who wanted more transparency. Transparency, Bernard repeated. That's the key word, isn't it? How so? Most trust disputes come down to transparency, or the lack of it. When one trustee controls everything and the beneficiaries don't have access to the financial records, you end up with imbalance. What's the fix? Depends. Sometimes you can request an audit, sometimes you file a petition with the court, sometimes you just renegotiate the terms. What if renegotiation isn't an option? Then you escalate, but that's messy. Messy how? Public, expensive, and it damages relationships permanently. I nodded. What if the goal isn't litigation? What if the goal is just rebalancing? He leaned back in his chair, studying me. You're not talking about a hypothetical client, are you? I didn't answer. Who are you really here for? He asked. Someone who needs help. Does this someone have a name? Not one I'm willing to share. He sighed. Look, I don't know what you're trying to do, but if you're going after Gareth Hale, you should know what you're getting into. I kept my expression neutral. I didn't mention Gareth Hale. You didn't have to. I've seen this before. Family member gets cut out, sibling tries to help, everything spirals, it never ends well. Why not? Because Gareth has Marion, and Marion has the money. You can't win against that. Maybe, but I can make it uncomfortable. He shook his head. You're wasting your time. That's my decision. He stood. I think we're done here. I stood too. One more question. Is there anything in the trust that could be challenged? Anything irregular? He looked at me for a long moment. Then quietly, if there was, I wouldn't tell you. Fair enough. I left his office and walked back to my car. Bernard's reaction had told me two things. One, Gareth's financial setup was solid, no obvious weak points. Two, Bernard was loyal, which meant I wasn't going to get help from that direction. But I'd expected that. What mattered now was timing. The family brunch was 3 weeks away. I needed everything in place by then. That weekend, I went through all the documents Rosa had sent me, lined them up chronologically, mapped out the flow of assets through the trust, identified every decision point, every signature, every transfer. And then I saw it. A single transaction from 4 years ago. A vehicle purchase. Not the SUV, but a sedan. Registered to the trust. But the insurance policy had lapsed for 6 months before being renewed. During that gap, the vehicle had been driven. I pulled up traffic records and found 3 citations issued during that period, all of them to Gareth, driving an uninsured vehicle registered to a trust he co-managed. It wasn't much, but it was something. I saved the file and sent Rosa a message. "Found something. Keep going," she replied 10 minutes later. "Okay. 3 weeks can feel like a long time or no time at all, depending on what you're waiting for. For me, it was both. The days moved steadily, but every moment felt weighted with anticipation. I spent those weeks building the final pieces of the plan. The key was subtlety. Gareth couldn't know I was preparing anything. Marion couldn't suspect I'd been digging into their finances, and Noah had to stay oblivious, which meant I stayed away from their house entirely. Instead, I worked from my apartment. Late nights at the kitchen table, laptop open, files spread out across the surface. I cross-referenced every document Rosa had sent me. Looked for patterns, looked for mistakes. The uninsured vehicle incident wasn't enough on its own, but it opened a door. I started pulling public records, business filings, property transfers, anything that touched the trust. Most of it was clean, but there were small inconsistencies. A property sold at below market value to an LLC Marion controlled. An investment account that listed Gareth as the manager but showed withdrawals that didn't match any disclosed expenses. Nothing illegal, but enough to raise questions. I drafted a summary document, kept it factual, listed every irregularity I'd found, along with supporting documentation. Then I packaged it all together and saved it to an encrypted drive. Rosa sent me updates every few days. She'd found more paperwork, a prenuptial agreement she'd signed before they got married. She'd been 24, Gareth had been 29. The document was short and brutal. In the event of separation, Rosa waived any claim to assets acquired during the marriage. I read it twice. It explained a lot. "Did you have a lawyer review this before you signed it?" I messaged her. "No. Gareth said it was standard, that everyone did it." "Did you read it?" "Not carefully." I didn't respond to that. There was nothing to say. She'd been young and trusting, and Gareth had taken advantage of that. But the prenup wasn't ironclad. Circumstances could challenge it. Fraud, coercion, unconscionability. It would take a lawyer and a courtroom, but it was possible. Still, I didn't want a courtroom. Courtrooms took time, and time meant Gareth and Marion could maneuver. No, I needed something faster. I needed leverage. On the second Tuesday in January, I got a call from Rita. She'd heard through a mutual contact that I was looking into trust structures. She wanted to know why. "Personal interest," I said. "Silas, you don't have a personal interest in anything that doesn't involve a problem. Maybe I'm expanding my skill set. Or maybe you're about to do something risky." "Would you stop me if I was?" She laughed. "No, but I'd want to know about it so I could bill you for consulting." I smiled. "Noted." She paused. "Seriously, though, if you're going after someone's trust, make sure you know what you're doing. Those things are designed to be bulletproof. I'm aware. And make sure you're not breaking any laws. Always. I mean it, Silas. You're good at what you do, but one misstep and you'll lose credibility. And once that's gone, it's gone." I appreciate the concern. It's not concern. It's pragmatism. I don't want to have to find a new contact. I thanked her and ended the call. She was right, of course. What I was planning wasn't illegal, but it was aggressive. If it backfired, it would damage more than just my relationship with Gareth. It would hurt Rosa too, and I couldn't let that happen. So I double-checked everything, reviewed every document, made sure every claim I was going to make could be supported. By the time the brunch rolled around, I was ready. The night before, I stayed at a hotel downtown. I didn't want to drive in the morning and risk being late or distracted. Rosa had confirmed I was on the guest list. Gareth had agreed without hesitation. "Of course Silas can come," he'd said. "It's a family event." Family. The word sat bitterly in my mind. I woke early, showered, dressed in a suit. Dark gray, white shirt, no tie. Professional but not aggressive. I wanted to look competent, not confrontational. At 9:30, I took a cab to the venue. It was a private dining room at a country club on the edge of town, the kind of place where membership cost more than most people's annual salaries. Gareth had chosen it, of course. I arrived 10 minutes early. The dining room was set up with a long table, 12 chairs, white linens, fresh flowers. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked a golf course. Everything was pristine. A server asked if I wanted coffee. I said yes. She poured me a cup and left me alone. I sat at the far end of the table, near the windows. Positioned so I could see everyone as they entered. Positioned so I had space to move. Gareth arrived first, with Marion. They were both dressed impeccably, Gareth in a navy blazer, Marion in a cream-colored suit. They greeted me with polite smiles. Gareth shook my hand. "Glad you could make it, Silas." "Wouldn't miss it." Marion took the seat at the head of the table. Gareth sat to her right. I stayed where I was. Noah arrived next, earbuds in, scrolling his phone. He pulled the earbuds out when he saw his grandmother and gave her a quick hug. Then he dropped into the chair next to Gareth without acknowledging anyone else. Elaine came in with another cousin I barely knew. They chatted quietly as they found their seats. And then Rosa arrived. She looked different. Not bad, just different. She wore a gray dress and minimal jewelry. Her hair was pulled back. She looked composed, controlled. She met my eyes briefly as she entered, then looked away, took the seat across from Gareth. The server returned and took drink orders. Mimosas for most, coffee for Marion, water for Rosa. Gareth stood once everyone had their drinks. He raised his glass. "I want to thank everyone for being here this morning. This annual brunch is something my mother started years ago, and it's become an important tradition for our family. A time to connect, to reflect, and to plan for the year ahead." He smiled around the table. No one interrupted. "I also want to take a moment to acknowledge how fortunate we are. The trust continues to perform well, our investments are solid, and we're all healthy and happy." Rosa's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Gareth continued. "I know some years are more challenging than others, but I'm confident that with prudent management and continued oversight, we'll maintain the stability we've built." He sat down. Marion nodded approvingly. "Well said, Gareth." The server brought out the first course. Eggs Benedict, fruit, pastries. We ate in relative silence. Small talk drifted across the table. Weather, upcoming travel plans, a charity event Marion was organizing. I waited. Halfway through the meal, Gareth cleared his throat. "Before we wrap up, I wanted to discuss a few items related to the trust. Just housekeeping, really, but I think it's important everyone stays informed." He pulled out a folder and opened it. "First, we've refinanced the mortgage on the house. Better interest rate, shorter term. Should save us a significant amount over the life of the loan." "Sounds reasonable," Elaine said. "Second, we're consolidating 2 of the investment accounts. Simpler to manage, lower fees." Marion nodded. "I approve." "And third," he glanced at Rosa, "we're transferring the SUV to a different insurance policy. The current one was more expensive than necessary." Rosa's fork paused halfway to her mouth. She set it down carefully. "What kind of policy?" she asked. "Commercial, through the trust." "I thought it was already through the trust." "It is, but this is a better rate." "Will I still be able to drive it?" "Of course." "Will I be listed as a driver?" Gareth hesitated, just for a second. But it was enough. "That's still being finalized," he said. Noah snorted. I glanced at him. He was smirking again. "Something funny?" I asked. He looked up. "Just thinking about how much paperwork goes into owning a car." "It's a lot of paperwork when it's not actually yours," I said. The table went quiet. Gareth's expression shifted. "Excuse me?" "The SUV. It's not Rosa's. It's registered to Marion. Always has been." "Silas," Rosa started, but I raised a hand. "I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I'm just stating a fact. The vehicle you gave Rosa for Christmas is legally owned by your mother, which means Rosa can't drive it without permission, can't insure it, can't make decisions about it. It's not hers." Gareth's face darkened. "That's a private family matter." "Is it? Because it seems like a pattern to me." "What pattern?" "The one where you give Rosa things that aren't actually hers. The SUV, the house, the bank accounts, the furniture, all of it's tied up in the trust. All of it's controlled by you and Marion. Rosa has access, sure, but she doesn't own anything." Marion spoke for the first time in minutes. Her voice was calm, cold. "Silas, you're overstepping." "Maybe, but someone needs to. This is none of your concern." "It is when it involves my sister?" Rosa stared at her plate. Her hands were trembling. Gareth leaned forward. Silas, I think you should leave. Not yet. This is a private event. You were invited as a courtesy. If you can't behave appropriately, I can behave just fine, but I think everyone at this table deserves to hear the truth. What truth? Noah asked. His smirk was gone now. I pulled a folder from the bag I'd brought and set it on the table. This truth. Gareth stared at it. What is that? A summary of irregularities I found in the trust's financial records. Property sales below market value. Insurance lapses on trust-owned vehicles. Withdrawals that don't match any disclosed expenses. Small things, but enough to raise questions. Marian's expression didn't change, but I saw her hands tighten on the armrests of her chair. You're bluffing, Gareth said. Am I? I slid the folder across the table. Gareth opened it. His face went pale as he read the first page. Where did you get this? Public records, bank filings, documents Rosa found. He looked at Rosa. You gave him access? She didn't answer. Rosa. His voice rose. Yes, she said quietly. I did. Why? Because I wanted to know the truth? The truth? The truth is I've taken care of you for 23 years, given you a home, a life, security, and this is how you repay me. Taken care of me, Rosa's voice was stronger now, or controlled me. They're the same thing. No, they're not. Gareth turned back to me. What do you want? I want Rosa's name added to the title of the house. I want her listed as a co-owner on at least one bank account, and I want the SUV transferred to her name, legally, permanently. That's absurd. Is it, or is it just fair? Silas, you don't understand how trusts work. I understand them perfectly, and I understand that the trust can be amended. All it takes is a 2/3 vote from the beneficiaries. I turned to Noah. He was staring at me, his earlier confidence gone. Noah, I said, you're a beneficiary. You have a vote. So let me ask you, do you think your mother deserves to own something? Anything? Noah looked at Gareth, then at Marian, then at Rosa. He trailed off. Noah, Gareth said sharply, don't answer that. Why not? I asked. What are you afraid of? I'm not afraid of anything. Then let him answer. The room was silent. Everyone was watching Noah. He shifted in his seat, uncomfortable under the scrutiny. I don't know, he said finally. You don't know? I repeated. It's complicated. It's not complicated. Your mother has been living in a house she doesn't own, driving cars she doesn't own, spending money she doesn't control. That's not complicated. That's wrong. Silas. Enough, Marian said. Her voice was sharp now. But I wasn't done. I kept my eyes on Marian. She sat perfectly still, her hands folded on the table, her expression unreadable. But I could see the calculation behind her eyes. She was assessing the situation, weighing her options. What you're asking for is unreasonable, she said finally. Why? Because the trust was designed to protect assets. Adding names, transferring titles, that undermines the structure. Or it creates equity. Equity isn't relevant here. Of course it is. Rosa's been part of this family for 23 years. She raised Noah. She maintained the household. She did everything that was asked of her. And she has nothing to show for it. She has security, Gareth interjected. She has a home. She has access, I interrupted. Not ownership, and access can be revoked any time you want. Rosa looked up. Her eyes were wet, but she wasn't crying. Is that true? Gareth hesitated. Rosa, you know I would never. Is it true? She asked again. He didn't answer. She turned to Marian. Could you take the house away from me? Marian's expression softened slightly. It's not about taking things away, dear. It's about managing resources responsibly. That's not an answer. The trust owns the house. The trustees make decisions about the trust. So yes, theoretically, we could make changes. But that doesn't mean we would. But you could. Marian didn't respond. Rosa looked around the table, at Gareth, who was staring at his plate, at Noah, who had gone back to looking uncomfortable, at Elaine, who was watching everything with wide eyes, at me. What do I need to do? She asked. Nothing yet, I said. But we need to make sure you're protected, and that means putting things in your name. Gareth stood abruptly. This conversation is over. Sit down, Marian said. He looked at her, surprised. Mother? Sit down. He sat. Marian turned to me. You've made your point, but what you're asking for requires legal changes. Documentation. It can't be done at a brunch table. I'm aware. So what's your proposal? A meeting, this week, with Rosa, Gareth, you, and your estate attorney. We review the trust documents and discuss amendments. And if we refuse? Then I take this folder. I gestured to the papers in front of Gareth. And I share it with the people who need to see it. You're threatening us? Gareth said. I'm offering a choice. Marion studied me. You're serious. Completely. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. Fine. We'll meet. Gareth looked at her, stunned. Mother, you can't be. Enough, Gareth. Her voice was firm. This situation has become untenable. We'll address it properly. She turned to Rosa. Thursday at 3, my attorney's office. Be there. Rosa nodded. Marion stood. This brunch is over. She walked out without another word. Gareth scrambled to follow her, Noah close behind. Elaine and the cousin hurried after them, clearly eager to escape. Rosa and I were left alone at the table. She stared at the folder Gareth had abandoned. Did I just ruin my marriage? No, you just started fixing it. He's going to hate me. Maybe, but at least you'll own something. She laughed. It was a shaky, fragile sound. I can't believe you did that. Someone had to. What if it backfires? What if they change their minds and kick me out? They won't. Marion's too smart for that. She knows that if she pushes too hard, this becomes public. And public means scrutiny. She can't afford scrutiny. How do you know? Because I found enough irregularities in those records to make an auditor curious. And if an auditor gets curious, everything unravels. Marion knows that. She'll make the changes to avoid the risk. Rosa picked up her water glass and took a long sip. Her hands were steadier now. Thank you, she said quietly. Don't thank me yet. Wait until Thursday. Thursday arrived cold and overcast. I met Rosa outside the attorney's office at 2:50. She wore a black coat and carried a leather folder. Her expression was determined. Ready? I asked. As ready as I'll ever be. We walked inside together. The office was on the 3rd floor of a brick building downtown. Tasteful, expensive, designed to make clients feel like their money was in good hands. The receptionist directed us to a conference room. Marion was already there, seated at the head of the table. Gareth sat to her right, arms crossed. An older man in a suit sat across from them. The attorney, I assumed. Marion gestured to the empty chairs. Sit. We did. The attorney introduced himself as Lawrence Finch. He shook my hand, then Rosa's. His grip was firm but not aggressive. I've reviewed the trust documents, he said, and I've also read the summary Mr. Oren provided. I have some concerns. What kind of concerns? Gareth asked. The kind that suggest we need to make adjustments? Such as? Lawrence opened a folder and pulled out several sheets of paper. First, the property sale from 4 years ago. It was conducted below market value, which is permissible within certain bounds, but the buyer was an LLC controlled by Mrs. Hale. That creates a potential conflict of interest. Marion's expression didn't change. The sale was reviewed by an independent appraiser. Yes, but the appraiser was hired by the trust. That's not quite the same as independent. Are you suggesting impropriety? I'm suggesting it would be difficult to defend if challenged. Gareth leaned forward. What's the fix? Revalue the property. If there's a discrepancy, either adjust the trust's records or compensate the difference. Lawrence turned to the insurance lapses. These are more straightforward. Technically, driving an uninsured vehicle violates the trust's terms. It's not criminal, but it does suggest negligence on the part of the trustees. It was an oversight, Gareth said. Perhaps, but oversight has consequences, such as beneficiaries questioning whether the trustees are managing assets responsibly. He looked at Rosa as he said it. She met his gaze and didn't look away. Let's cut to the point, Marion said. What does Mr. Oren want? Rosa's name added to the house title, access to a joint bank account with her name on it, and the SUV transferred to her ownership. Lawrence made notes. Those are all feasible, but they'll require amendments to the trust. Then amend it, Marion said. Gareth stared at her. Mother. Gareth, be quiet. She turned back to Lawrence. Draft the amendments. I'll sign them. And Mr. Hale? Lawrence asked. Gareth's jaw tightened. Fine, I'll sign. Lawrence nodded. I'll need a few days to prepare the documents. Once they're ready, we'll schedule another meeting for signatures. Make it less than a week, I said. He raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. I'll do my best. Marion stood. If there's nothing else, I have other appointments. She walked out without waiting for a response. Gareth followed, though he shot me a look that promised this wasn't over. Lawrence gathered his papers and excused himself. leaving Rosa and me alone in the conference room. She let out a long breath. I can't believe that worked. It's not done yet. We still need to see the actual documents. But she agreed. Marian agreed. She did, which means she's more worried about exposure than she is about keeping control. Rosa stood and walked to the window, looked down at the street below. What happens after the amendments are signed? Then you decide what you want to do. Stay or leave, you mean? That's up to you. She was quiet for a moment. Then she turned back to me. I don't know what I want yet. You don't have to decide today. We left the office together. Outside, the wind had picked up. Rosa pulled her coat tighter. The next few days were quiet. Lawrence called twice to update me on the documents. Everything was proceeding as expected. The amendments would be ready by Monday. Monday arrived. Lawrence called at 9 in the morning to confirm the meeting was set for 2 that afternoon. Same office, same conference room. I picked up Rosa at 1:30. She wore a navy dress and carried the same leather folder from last week. Nervous? I asked. Terrified, she admitted. That's normal. We arrived at the office at 1:50. Lawrence was waiting in the conference room with a stack of documents. Marian and Gareth arrived 5 minutes later. Let's get started, Lawrence said. He walked us through the amendments, page by page, clause by clause. Rosa's name was added to the house title as a co-owner. A joint bank account was established with both Rosa and Gareth listed as signatories. The SUV's title was transferred entirely to Rosa. Any questions? Lawrence asked. No one spoke. Then we'll proceed to signatures. Marian signed first. Her signature was elegant, practiced. Gareth signed next, his hand moving quickly across the page like he wanted to be done with it. Then Rosa signed. Her hand shook slightly, but she didn't hesitate. Lawrence collected the documents and nodded. That's it. The amendments are official. Rosa looked at me. Her eyes were bright. It's done? It's done. Marian stood without a word and left. Gareth followed her out. Rosa and I stayed seated for a moment. How do you feel? I asked. She thought about it. Lighter. Good. We left the office together. Outside, the sun had broken through the clouds, warm despite the winter chill. Rosa turned to me on the sidewalk. Can I drive you somewhere? In the SUV? She smiled, genuinely, fully. In my SUV. We walked to the parking garage. The SUV was on the 3rd level, gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Rosa pulled the keys from her purse and held them up. She unlocked the doors. We climbed inside. The interior smelled like new leather. Rosa adjusted the mirrors, the seat, the steering wheel, taking her time, making it hers. Then she started the engine and pulled out of the parking space. As we drove down the ramp and into the afternoon light, I glanced over at her. She was smiling. Not the practiced smile I'd seen at Christmas dinner, not the forced smile she wore around Gareth. A real one. What happens Thursday? We make sure the promises become paperwork. She nodded. Then she smiled. It wasn't a big smile. Just a small, genuine curve at the corner of her mouth. It was the first real smile I'd seen from her in years.